Hello, welcome back to the Red Couch Reading Room. Hopefully you've already taken your reading comp quiz. If not, go do that. Excellent. So let's go ahead. We're going to run through Acts 4 and 5 today for understanding before we go on to anything else. Hopefully you see how, you noticed, I suspect, that Shakespeare was really skipping around. The scenes they're like little choppy jumps, almost vignettes from one and then another place. And you really have to read the summary or the commentary in the book on the page facing your book. If you have my version, there's a little setup for each scene. You have to read those to kind of know where you are. Otherwise, but if it's in a production, obviously it's much smoother and it's easier to understand. But let's just run through this, starting with Act 4, Scene 1. Go ahead and turn in your book there. I hope you're taking notes. All of these notes are going to help you a great deal, both in your Socratic seminar that you may be having today, but also if you decide to do one of the Julius Caesar essays for your ConMag. This will really help. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at Act 4, Scene 1. We come right in. This is a scene in which Antony's true character is revealed. I said, look at who he's going to kill and what he said about the will, right? Remember on my lecture last time. So what do you find out? You find out that Antony is more than willing, not just Antony, but Octavius as well, and Lepidus. This is going to be the future triumvirate of Rome. They are going to establish the Roman Empire. This is now tyranny by dictatorship. Octavius is the next Caesar. And they're more than willing to kill their brothers, their nephews, their own family, their friends, whoever's closest to them that might stand between them and consolidating power. They are very willing to mark those out that might be considered a threat and just get rid of them. Okay, so that says something about their character. Antony is portrayed very much as bloodthirsty, heartless, ruthless. He trades his nephew's death for the death of Lepidus' brother, you know. I mean, it's very cold and calculating. Interesting. This, historically speaking, the second triumvirate of Antony, Octavius, and Lepidus did not last very long. And who do you think might have emerged as the first true Roman emperor? Caesar Augustus? Octavius did. So it's interesting here too that there's a power play between Antony and Octavius that you're going to see play out. All right, so we go down through here and we see, as Lepidus exits, we even see Antony in line 14 referring to Lepidus, that this is a slight, unmeritable man meant to be set on errands. Is it fit the threefold world divided? He should stand, one of the three, to share it. Antony already is willing to push Lepidus out. Antony doesn't want to even share power with Lepidus in this play. And Octavius, so you thought him and took his voice, who should be pricked to die, and our black sentence of prescription. Octavius, I have seen more days than you, and though we lay these honors on this man to ease ourselves of diverse slanderous loads, he shall but bear them as the ass bears gold. So like a donkey bears a load, he's expecting Lepidus to do part of the work, but not really assert himself to have any part in the authority of running Rome. So he's looking at him as a workhorse, basically, is what he's saying here. Octavius says, you may do your will, but he's a tried and valiant soldier. And Antony says, so is my horse, right? And I do appoint him store of provender. In other words, and I feed him for that, okay? Antony's character through this whole, this is a private scene among people he is working with, and we really see him for who he is. Very cold, very calculating, very manipulative. Okay? Scene 2. This is just a little interspersed scene. Brutus is talking a little bit to Lucilius before Cassius comes. They're expecting Cassius to come, and he says, Lucilius, line 15, a word, Lucilius. How he received you, let me be resolved. He says, so how did he treat you when you went to see him? And Lucilius says, with courtesy and respect enough, but not such familiar instances. He was fine, but not maybe as warm as he used to be. And Brutus right away in his next, thou hast described a hot friend cooling. So he's afraid his friendship with Cassius is cooling off. Cassius comes in, and Cassius is mad. And Cassius wants to stand right there and yell at Brutus. And Brutus Most noble brother, you have done me wrong, line 41. And Brutus says, Cassius, line 46, be content, speak your grief softly. I do know you well. Before the eyes of both our armies here, which should receive nothing but love from us, let us not wrangle. Bid them move away. Then in my tent, Cassius, enlarge your griefs, and I will give you audience. And so Cassius tells his commander to take his army a little bit away, and that's just scene 2. So that's kind of the foyer, really, to scene 3. Think of scene 1 and scene 3 as foil scenes. In scene 1, we really saw Antony's true character, and now in scene 3, in another private moment where he's just talking with a friend, Cassius, we're going to see who Brutus really is. Here's a private, unguarded moment. We're going to find out who Brutus is. So, in scene 3, by the way, it's worth thinking, why did Brutus want to confer with Cassius inside the tent? He's right. He didn't want people to see that there was a divide or a split between them. That could be bad in an army. You don't want to encourage people to think that the top officials aren't united. Okay, so let's look at scene 3. Scene 3, Cassius comes in and he says, you have wronged me. Here's my letters, and I was asking for favors for this man, and you've condemned me, and you aren't even listening to what I have to say. And Brutus says, you wronged yourself to write in such a case. And then line 9, let me tell you, Cassius, you yourself are much condemned to have an itching palm to sell and market your office for gold to undeservers. Cassius, an itching palm? Okay, they're going to have this argument. They're arguing because Cassius has basically taken some dirty profits. He's taken a bribe from this man to write a letter to Brutus to try to get this other man's sentence reduced. Okay, so Brutus is angry. He says, by the name of Cassius honors his corruption, and chastisement doth therefore hide his head. So I can't even punish this man if you're going to step between me and what needs to be done. Brutus says, remember March, the Ides of March, remember. Did not great Julius bleed for justice's sake? Didn't we kill Caesar so that justice would reign? But that's really only why Brutus killed Caesar, do you see? Not Cassius. Okay? What villain touched his body that did not stab, and not for justice? What shall one of us that struck the foremost man of all this world, but for supporting robbers, shall we now contaminate our fingers with base bribes, and sell the mighty space of our large honors for so much trash as may be grasped thus? I had rather be a dog and bathe the moon than such a Roman. Okay, so he's accusing Cassius of these things, and he's saying, wait a second, we did this for justice, and now you're turning around and being corrupt. Okay, this shows us both Cassius and Brutus's character. We see Brutus, his integrity and his honor, being horrified by the corruption and the power grabbing that Cassius is showing. But it also shows that he might be a little naive and idealistic. Perhaps he's such a noble, honorable man that he cannot imagine that others are not as noble and honorable, and that's a problem. Okay, so they argue all around now. They're going to argue about who's a better friend, who's a better soldier, but ultimately understand that Brutus is upset that Cassius is not the man he thought he was. And Cassius is upset that things didn't turn out like he thought they would. So let's read just a little bit of this. Let's look at line 30. Cassius says, Brutus, bait me not. I'll not endure it. You forget yourself to hedge me in. I am a soldier, older in practice, abler than yourself to make conditions. Go to, you are not, Cassius. I am. I say you're not. Urge me no more. I shall forget myself. And so they argue back and forth, back and forth. Down in line 60, you wrong me every way, you wrong me, Brutus. I said an elder soldier, not a better. Did I say better? You look back at line 33, he said abler. Doesn't abler mean better? So yes, he did say better. If you did, I care not. Peace. So Brutus is like, really? Stop. Line 92, I denied you not. You did. I did not. He was but a fool that brought my answer back. A friend should bear his friend's infirmities, but Brutus makes mine greater than they are. I did not till you practiced them on me. You love me not. I do not like your faults. A friendly eye could never see such faults. A flatterer's would not, though they do appear as huge as high Olympus. So Cassius is saying, you're not really a very good friend if you're going to be, pointing out all my faults. And Brutus is saying, well, you're starting to practice your faults on me, and they're huge. How can I ignore something that's as big as Mount Olympus? So they go back and forth, and Finally, Cassius is just done, and he says, line 109, "Oh, I could weep mine spirit from mine eyes. There is my dagger, and here my naked breast, within a heart dearer than Pluto's, mine richer than gold. If that thou beest a Roman, take it forth. If I that denied thee gold will give my heart. Strike as thou didst at Caesar, for I know when thou didst hate him worst, thou lovest him better than thou ever lovest Cassius." So once again, we see jealous Cassius, envious Cassius, okay? But now he's like getting all dramatic and saying, well, then go ahead and just kill me if you think this of me. And Brutus says, sheathe your dagger, and then he kind of hints, I've got something else bothering me. He says, you are yoked with a lamb, Brutus as a lamb, who carries anger as the flint bears fire, who much enforced shows a hasty spark and straight is cold again. I get angry fast, but I don't stay angry long. And Cassius says, has Cassius lived to be but mirth and laughter to Brutus when grief and blood ill-tempered vexeth him? I was ill-tempered in my heart too. And they clasp hands, and in 168, Brutus says, no man bears sorrow better. Portia is dead. Huh? Portia? She is dead. How scaped I killing when I crossed you so? Cassius thinks, oh my goodness, if this is why you're upset and I came in and crossed you, why didn't you just kill me then? So they end friends, but Brutus intimates that Portia's suicide is just too much for him to bear, that she was impatient of his absence. She was grieved that Octavius and Mark Antony were so strong, and it says, the tidings came with this, she fell distract, and her attendant's absence swallowed fire, and died so? Even so, oh, you immortal gods. So they're kind of horrified by this. His wife Portia just had killed herself because she couldn't bear the news that Octavius and Antony were winning. They were strong. Then look down at line 249. So they talk a little bit. Cicero is dead. Line 200. Messala comes in and tells them, by prescription and bills of outlawry, Octavius, Antony, and Lepidus have put to death 100 senators. Okay, that's a direct fulfillment of Calpurnia's dream, where she saw Caesar's statue with 100 spouts running blood. 100 senators have been executed. We go on down now. Look at line 249. Line 249. Brutus says, there is a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea we are now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves or lose our ventures. So the tide's in, we have to go with it or we might lose the chance. This is the time for action, and if we miss this opportunity, it might be gone forever. So then a little bit later, they all leave. Everyone leaves. The boy Lucius is drowsy, and he plays a little song for Brutus, and then he falls asleep. And at that moment, enter the ghost of Caesar. Now, Shakespeare often has ghosts visit Hamlet's father's ghost visits him. In Macbeth, there is a ghost. Richard III has a ghost, and he will use this to indicate a guilty conscience or remorse, or that the character is unhappy or fearful of the future. Hamlet was fearful. He didn't know what was going on. He was unhappy. Macbeth was guilty. He had a guilty conscience. And so here we see Brutus being visited by the ghost of Caesar, who tells him, I'll see you on the plains of Philippi. Okay, so Brutus says, well, all right then, it shall be. Let's go on to Act 5. We're going to try to run through this really quickly because this is all very clear. I think the action parts are clear. I just want to make sure that you're getting the underlying, the power play that's playing out throughout these two acts in particular. So let's look at scene 1 of Act 5. Antony right away is trying to take charge. Octavius and Antony and their army are trying to decide. And Antony says in line 7, I am in their bosoms and I know wherefore they do it. In other words, I understand them. So let me direct you, right? The messenger comes in and says, prepare the generals. The enemy comes on in gallant show. Octavius says, lead your battles, or Antony says, Octavius, lead your battle softly on upon the left hand of the even field. So Antony says, you go on around that way on the left-hand side. And Octavius says, up on the right hand, I, keep thou the left. Antony, Why do you cross me in this exigent? Octavius, I do not cross you, but I will do so. All right, Octavius is taking the lead away from Antony. Octavius is implying that he is the authority. Now, one of the old definitions of cross is to thwart or oppose. Okay, so Antony is saying, why are you opposing me in this? I'm the one that knows them. Why don't you let me give direction? But Octavius, although he's not as old as Antony, he wasn't Caesar's trusted friend. Octavius is saying, you're not just going to be picking up where Caesar left off. I'm the nephew. I'm going to be the next Caesar. So Octavius, he was named as Caesar's heir in the will. He will become Emperor Caesar Augustus. And so Shakespeare is here showing the beginning of who's going to win this power struggle. Shakespeare is showing the rise of Octavius, and he is now showing the waning of the power of Antony. Does that make sense? So look down just a little bit further, line 25. There's something significant here. Antony says to Octavius, no, Caesar, we will answer on their charge. Notice that that's the first time Antony ascribes that title to Octavius. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. Now in come Brutus and Cassius, and they have this little battle. There's puns, there's repetitions there. Antony, not stingless too. Brutus, oh yes, and soundless too, for you have stolen their buzzing, Antony, and very wisely threat before you sting. Look at line 43. Villains, you did not so when your vile daggers hacked one another in the sides of Caesar. You showed your teeth like apes and fawned like hounds and bowed like bondsmen, kissing Caesar's feet while damned Casca like a cur behind struck Caesar on the neck. Oh, you flatterers. Cassius looks at Brutus and says, flatterers? Now, Brutus, thank yourself. This tongue had not offended so today if Cassius might have ruled. Remember back in Act 2? Cassius wanted to kill Antony too, and Brutus overruled him. Remember? So Cassius is saying, this is your fault that he's here, Brutus. So Octavius and Brutus and Cassius and Antony go around a little bit. They leave. Nothing is settled. They're still going to battle. And as they leave, line 79, Cassius and Messala are just sitting there talking, and Cassius mentions, this is my birthday, as this very day was Cassius born. Give me thy hand, Messala, be thou my witness that against my will, as Pompey was, I am compelled to set upon one battle all our liberties. And then he goes on to say in lines 85 through 95, you know, there have been some omens. There used to be these eagles that stayed with us, these noble birds. And I've noticed recently the eagles are gone, and instead, this morning they are fled away and gone. Line 92, and in their steads do ravens, crows, and kites fly o'er our heads and downward look on us as we were sickly prey. The birds of prey are hanging over them, like waiting for their corpses to be ready and available for them to eat. Okay, so Cassius is seeing this horrible, foreboding omen, the end of scene 1, and Cassius asks him, line 107, if we do lose this battle, then is this the very last time we shall speak together? What are you then determined to do? Brutus, even by the rule of that philosophy by which I did blame Cato for the death which he did give himself. So he's saying, when Cato killed himself, I thought it was cowardly. He says, I know not how, but I do find it cowardly and vile for fear of what might fall, so to prevent the time of life. I do find it cowardly and vile for fear of what might fall to commit suicide. Wait a second, why did he kill Caesar? For fear of what might fall. Okay, so his reasoning's all different this time. Cassius, then if we lose this battle, you are contented to be led in triumph through the streets of Rome? Brutus, no, Cassius, no. Think not, thou noble Roman, that ever Brutus will go bound to Rome. Okay, there is a thought, better dead than dishonored in Rome. Okay, better dead than dishonored. If a person's honor was endangered, he would commit suicide rather than lose that honor. Remember, this is pre-Christian Rome, so death before dishonor was the call. If this sounds a little bit like some of the ancient Asian cultures, you are correct. It's the idea of saving face, saving honor. Honor was what they lived for. That's why Brutus was really so proud of being considered an honorable man. So Shakespeare here is foreshadowing a little bit the idea that Brutus might not end well, okay? By Brutus saying, Brutus will never go bound to Rome. He's not going to give anybody the satisfaction of conquering him, of taking him in. There's a second scene here in Act 5, very, very short, where Brutus gives orders for Messala to tell Cassius to go ahead and take the troops down onto Octavius's army. Unfortunately, this is evidently premature. According to Cassius, in the next scene, we see that Brutus is not perhaps the military general that he should be. Kind of indicates poor military judgment, that these orders were premature. So let's go on and look at scene 3. Now, this is an interesting scene. Titinius, who is Cassius's good friend, says that the forces are losing because Brutus gave the word too early, line 5. Brutus gave the word too early, who, having some advantage on Octavius, took it too eagerly. So Cassius says, I can't see. My eyes have never been that good. I can't see. Line 15, Titinius, if thou lovest me, mount thou my horse and hide thy spurs in him till he have brought thee up to yonder troops and here again, that I may be rest assured whether yon troops are friend or enemy. So Titinius goes riding off to find out, and Pindarus says, Pindarus, get up there on that rock and watch Titinius go and tell me what's going on. Pindarus comes back and says, oh Lord, Titinius is enclosed round about with horsemen that make him spur, and oh no, they're shouting for joy. And Cassius says, come down, don't look anymore. Oh, coward that I am, to live so long to see my best friend taken before my face. So he says, Pindarus, come and be a free man. Pindarus is his slave. Run me through with this sword that killed Caesar, and you won't stand to answer for it. And as he dies, as Pindarus stabs Cassius, Cassius says, Caesar, thou art revenged, even with the sword that killed thee. And Pindarus looks around and says, whoo, I'm free, I'm not sticking around, I'm out of here. So Pindarus leaves. Some people have said, did Pindarus report wrongly on purpose? But I don't think that's the case, because he says, so I am free, yet would not so have been, durst I have done my will. So it was against his will that he did this. Okay, so Titinius and Messala come back in, and Titinius says, oh, these tidings are going to comfort Cassius, and they find him dead. And Titinius says, this was he, Messala, line 66. But Cassius is no more, O setting sun, as in thy red rays that doth sink tonight, so in his red blood Cassius' day is set. The sun of Rome is set. Our day is gone. So it's this metaphor, mixing up the life of Cassius and the cause of the Roman Republic. Some people think this could be the climax of the play. I disagree. I think it was earlier. But some people do see this because he's proclaiming pretty much the death of the Roman Republic here. Cassius is the son of Rome that is setting. And then, of course, Titinius, and line 100, come Cassius' sword and find Titinius' heart. So now Titinius kills himself rather than be captured. We have another quick scene in scene 4 where Brutus's forces are defeated, and so Antony's forces are coming in to take them all. Brutus escapes, but Lucilius impersonates Brutus to keep Brutus from being searched for, and Antony responds to that impersonation by saying that he is noble, that Lucilius should be treated with all courtesy. And Antony is basically impressed with his loyalty. He's impressed with Lucilius, his loyalty to Brutus, to his friend. So, scene 5, last scene in the play. Brutus is reduced to begging somebody to kill him. First, line 5, hark thee, Clitus. And he whispers to Clitus, Clitus, what, I, my lord? No, not for all the world. Then down line 8, Brutus, hark thee, Dardanus. He whispers to Dardanus, Dardanus, shall I do such a deed? Okay, he asks Dardanus. Down further, line 17, Brutus, come hither, good Volumnius, list a word. What says my lord? Why this, Volumnius? Volumnius down in line 34. That's not an office for a friend, my lord. So he asks all these people, he asks one after the other, and they all refuse. And Brutus finally comes to Strato. Everybody else is gone. Farewell to you, and you, Volumnius. Strato, thou hast been all this while asleep. Farewell to thee too, Strato. And Clitus, fly, my lord, fly. Here, everybody's coming. They're coming right now. Strato, line 52. Hold then my sword and turn away thy face while I do run upon it. Wilt thou, Strato? Strato, give me your hand first. Fare you well, my lord. Farewell, good Strato. Brutus runs on his sword. Caesar, now be still. I killed not thee with half so good a will. In other words, he's happier about killing himself than he was about killing Caesar. But Caesar, be still. In other words, the ghost be silenced. He's revenged now. Antony and Octavius come in. Strato explains what happened. And Antony, line 74, says, this was the noblest Roman of them all. All the conspirators, save only he, did that they did in envy of great Caesar. He only, in a general honest thought and common good to all, made one of them. His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was a man. All right. Brutus's body is going to be treated with respect. Octavius says it can lie in state in his tent. So let's talk about the play. Let's talk about where the climax is to the play. If our question is, can Brutus save Rome? Will Brutus prevail and be able to save Rome from tyranny? I think we know by the end of Act 3 it's not going to happen. When Brutus is running to escape with Cassius after Antony turns the crowd, we know that's not the case. So that's why I make my case so strongly that it's Antony's speech that sways the mob that is the turning point. Then from the denouement, you saw how Act 4 and 5 are just one little scene after another. The conspirators begin to quarrel. Caesar's ghost appears. The generals all meet. The armies have a battle. Cassius mistimes his death after Brutus mistimes sending in the troops. And then the conclusion, we see Brutus and Cassius have taken their own lives, and we see Antony and Octavius and Lepidus as the powers for Rome going forward. So it could be the moment that Cassius dies, because at that point it is clear the conspirators will be defeated. They've lost the confidence. The fickle wind of fate is blowing against them. We see, Tentius proclaiming the sun of Rome has set. So then the question is, all right, if that's the case, if the let's say the climax is at Antony's speech, who's the tragic hero in Julius Caesar? Now, a tragic hero is somebody who is noble and good but has a fatal flaw that's going to wind up getting them either killed or something bad happen to their life. My view is that it has to be Brutus. Brutus is the hero of Shakespeare's play. Caesar's already shown to be evil in Act 1. First thing we find out is that he is evil. We are told that pretty much. He wants the crown. He slays Pompey. In Act 2, he's lured away from Calpurnia and down to the Senate, basically out of pride and wanting that crown, because there's the rumor that he'll be crowned that day. Brutus was more noble than he was evil. His fortunes go from good to bad, which is the pattern with a tragic hero. After killing Caesar, he was known. It's not just what he thinks about himself, it's what everybody else thinks about him. They all believed he was the most noble man in Rome, and in fact, Antony ends the play by saying that Shakespeare would not have had the play wrapped up like that if he hadn't wanted that to be the last thing you think of him. His fall is tragic because he's ultimately an admirable person, whose constancy and love of his country is unquestioned. His integrity is strong, his principles are firm, but his fatal flaw is what? We've been pointing it out a little bit. He's naive, isn't he? He's not a good judge of people. He's maybe a little idealistic. He's not able to see that everybody else doesn't operate by the same principles he does. He lives in a world of honor as an honorable man, and he makes that overstated assumption that everybody else is as honorable as he is. He can't recognize deceit or manipulation in Cassius or in anybody else. That's also why he lets Antony speak at the funeral. Antony promised, so he just assumed he was going to stick with that promise and all would be well. So we need to address theme. Shakespeare has shown us many themes, right? I think that there's definitely a theme of loyalty and betrayal. Can betrayal ever be the right thing to do? That's something that he examines. Can we ever eliminate self from a decision? In other words, persuasion and the fickleness of our own hearts and our minds. How do we make decisions? That's looked at. That's a theme. So the theme of persuasion, how we are persuaded. What's the difference between persuasion and manipulation? Where's that line? And then finally, I think the theme we really see Shakespeare hammering away here about is fate versus free will. Can we change our fate? Can we intercede in the fate of a country? Brutus did everything he could to save Rome from tyranny. And yet some would argue that his very act pushed Rome into tyranny, and it became the beginnings of the Roman Empire at that moment. So I believe that the theme primarily revolves around fate versus free will, and that interplay. Can we be in charge of our fate? Can we change the fate of a country? Some interesting thoughts. This play is a big departure from previous views of Brutus. It's interesting to note in Dante's Inferno, which was written in the early 1300s, so just 300 years earlier than this, closer to Shakespeare than we are. And in Dante's Inferno, Brutus and Cassius are down there in the last circle of hell, right along with Judas Iscariot and Satan. Judas Iscariot, betrayer of Christ, with the betrayers of benefactors. And he considers them two of the three worst villains in history for killing Caesar. So it is obvious that Shakespeare does not feel that way. Brutus is not the villain here. As Antony's words testify, placed there at the very end, the last thing the audience hears about Brutus is Antony's words, the noblest man in Rome. It is always interesting to look at concurrent accounts of an event, and since this is a historic event, it behooves us to take a look at that. Plutarch wrote 150 years after the assassination, and Shakespeare is thought to have drawn most of his story from Plutarch's account, but there is a more concurrent account, more interesting. The earliest surviving account is detailed by a man named Nicholas of Damascus. He was a scholar, he was a bureaucrat, and his account makes Decimus, and Shakespeare called him Decius Brutus, the leader of the conspiracy. I have a little PDF of it from eyewitnesstohistory.com. I'm going to include it in your readings. This section of writing. It's very interesting to see what the real history of the event was, how much is really known, and kind of get an idea for how much Shakespeare had to construct out of his imagination. It's interesting to see that Nicholas of Damascus wrote his account of the murder of Caesar a few years after the event. While he was not actually present when the assassination occurred, he had the opportunity to speak with those who were. He was a friend of Herod the Great and gathered his information during a visit to Rome, and his account is thought to be reliable. And he talks about the conspirators meeting each other's homes. He talks about his friends were alarmed at certain rumors, tried to stop him from going to the Senate House. He was having occasional dizzy spells. His wife Calpurnia was frightened by some visions in her dreams. So there were bad omens. The priest brought, and there's all these things that are very similar. The Senate rose in respect for his position when they saw him entering. Those who were to have a part in the plot stood near him. Right next to him went Tullius Cimber, whose brother had been exiled by Caesar. Under pretext of a humble request on behalf of this brother, Cimber approached and grasped the mantle of his toga, seeming to want to make a more positive move with his hands upon Caesar. Caesar wanted to get up and use his hands, but was prevented by Cimber and became annoyed exceedingly. And that was the moment the men set to work, all quickly unsheathing their daggers and rushing at him. So this will only take you, 1 minute to read through. It's very interesting, so I've attached that to your week's work. Well, you have a final event to attend to today, whether that's going to be your very first Socratic seminar, where you really consider some of the study questions that I asked you about, the themes of this work, or if you're going to be, and if you do that, you're going to be defending your ideas with quotes from the text, right? So I hope you're well prepared. Or if it's just going to be a discussion over those ideas with your teacher or parent, or perhaps you're going to get to watch a production of the entire play. Whatever it is, I hope you've enjoyed Julius Caesar and Shakespeare, and maybe you see a little bit more now of why he's considered such a master of the English language. So come back when you're done with your final event for a quick setup for this coming week.